Okay, everyone, welcome to a mini series from JLI titled Techias HaMesim, The Resurrection of the Dead. And then this is like a continuation of the last JLI course that we did, which was all about Mashiach, the Messianic era, and the redemption. And now we take it one step further with something even more fantastical, which is that the dead will arise, that the departed will be living again. So before we begin, we're going to do two exercises. Exercise number one is, it's not an exercise, but I'd like to hear what are the questions that you're hoping to get answers to by the end of the 3 lessons. So is there anything specific, so I just can know where to focus, because there's so much to talk about in this topic that I don't even know if we'll be able to complete it in 3 lessons. But we're going to limit it to 3 lessons. Is there anything specifically that you're trying to gain understanding about or curious, or if you could share why you joined this course, and then we could take it from there. So we'll start. We'll start with Ken.
Well, I just feel resurrection is a way of people coping with the finality of death and not being afraid of the finality of death. And the resurrection calms your fear of death.
Okay. So Ken's instinct is that it's really like the communist said, religion is the opium of the masses. You know, it's a coping mechanism to cope with life. So the same thing.
Is this the, oh, yes.
The or you want to sit here?
I'll sit forward.
Okay, perfect. So some people believe that the resurrection of the dead is like a coping mechanism. Is a coping mechanism for the finality of death. Fine. Joe, you want to?
Yeah, I always thought that Olam Haba, heaven, however we understand it, was really very wonderful. Like any pleasure that we experience on this world isn't even an infinitesimal fraction of what we will experience in Olam Haba. Isn't that good enough? Why do we want to be resurrected into physical form?
Excellent. Right? We always speak about how spiritual life is more real and more authentic than the materialistic life. And so from a Jewish point of view, you're taking the souls after a person passes away. The souls go on to heaven, and then they're promised that they're going to be forced to go back into a body in a resurrection. That seems like a punishment, not a reward. You know, we're trying to free ourselves from the chains of the materialistic reality, and now it seems like the opposite. It doesn't seem like such a great, it seems anti-Jewish. Okay, Charles?
Yes, so I mean, I'm aware that it's a Jewish concept, so I can say, yes, Jews believe that. But if someone cornered me and said, do you really believe the bodies are going to come up? I'd start to question, I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. So I'd like to, become more familiar with what we actually believe. And then also to be able to answer the question for other Jews when they say, really, we believe in resurrection of the dead, then I can give a somewhat informed response.
Okay, yeah. So what exactly is the belief? Are we coming down from heaven? Is there a light shines down on earth and bodies come down? How do the souls come to the body? Okay, very good. So hopefully we'll answer all those questions and many more over the next 3 lessons. But to do that, we have to ask the big question, which is, what makes Judaism unique from all other religions? If you had to say there's one thing that makes Judaism unique from every other major religious faith, because I don't really know much about, I don't know all the faiths, but at least from the major faiths, what makes Judaism unique? Anyone care to share?
I'd say we all received revelation at Sinai.
Okay.
Like the whole people, not just one person.
Right? Judaism is unique in the claim that all people that were 600, at least 600,000, maybe even 3 million people, were God revealed themselves. They weren't believers in a prophet who told them about God. They experienced God directly, and they knew it was real, and then they passed on to their children every Seder night, years on end. We spoke to God. So that's unique. You know, many people sharing the same story, the same history that we met God. Okay, very good. What I would say, another thing that's very unique, let's give an introduction, okay? And this will get us to understand what's unique about Judaism. You know, there's a difference, at least for the sake of this lesson, between reward and consequence, right? A reward, and this is what makes Judaism's idea of reward very unique. Typically, if we tell a child, do your homework, and you get a Laffy Taffy. The homework and Laffy Taffy have nothing to do with each other.
Homework or what?
Do your homework, and you get a Laffy Taffy. You get a candy.
Okay, Taffy.
You get a candy. The homework and the candy have nothing to do with each other. It's just a way of incentivizing the child to do what he wants to do. Or consequences, you know, behave. If not, you'll go to your room. Going to your room is not a result from the misbehavior, but it's a punishment. However, waking up refreshed after a good night of sleep, it's not a reward for going to sleep early. It's a result, right? It's a consequence. And for every single time that the Torah promises something, this is what the Torah believes. You're not getting rewarded. In other words, if you do a mitzvah, life will be good. It's you are creating the good. You are creating the good circumstances for yourself. Similar to the person who jumps off the roof and breaks a leg. It's not a punishment, it's a result. And so by understanding how the resurrection of the dead plays in to being a reward for acting Jewish, behaving Jewishly, we'll understand what makes Judaism very unique amongst all the other religions. So let's start off by taking a look at a concept called Olam Haba. Okay, so let's start off with text 1. We'll begin with Joel. If you can read for us text 1 on page 3.
Okay, page 3. The ultimate, should I start with the box? Maimonides, Mishnah Torah. All right, the ultimate of all reward and the final good that will have no end or decrease in life is the life of the world to come.
Okay, the ultimate reward, the biggest reward that Judaism promises to its adherents is the world to come. But what is the world to come? Once we have a picture of what the world to come is, we'll be able to do a deep dive. So let's first go into resurrection of the dead. So let's read a few texts, and then we'll try and make sense out of a few texts. Charles, if you can read for us text 2. On page 4.
Got it. Okay. So it's part of Ani Ma'amin. I believe with complete faith that the dead will be resurrected at a time of the Creator's choosing. Blessed be his name, and exalted be his remembrance forever and ever.
Okay, there's 13 principles of faith, and one of them is that Jews believe in the resurrection of the dead. Throughout the Talmud, it discusses the resurrection of the dead in numerous places, and it spends a lot of time tracing its source text throughout the writings of the prophet and in the 5 books of Moses. One of the most famous stories of resurrection of the dead can be found in the story of Isaiah, which is text 3. Ken, if you could read for us text
I
3.
will, but if you don't mind, liturgy for Ani Mami. Where's that liturgy from?
Okay, so it's found in, let me give an introduction. Maimonides, one of his works was an introduction to Talmud, or an introduction to Mishnah. And there's a tractate of Mishnah that speaks about the world to come, a section of Mishnah in Sanhedrin that speaks about the world to come. And he wrote, what are the 13 fundamental beliefs of Judaism? It's a big work. And then someone summarized it into short, rhyming verses, and it became part of many siddurim. Part of many siddurs. It didn't make it into the Chabad siddur, but many siddurs have the Ani Mami. So that's where this is.
And Ani means I mean Emunah.
I believe with complete faith, Ani Mami B'Emunah Shalem, that there will be a resurrection of the dead. This is a principle.
Is that same hymn that we sing on Yom Kippur?
No,
That's a different one.
that's a different one. Right. This one is, this is when many people that get bat mitzvah here do the Ani Mami, they recite the Ani Mami. Okay.
May your dead live, my corpses shall rise awake and sing. You who dwell in the dust, for a dew of lights is your dew, and to the earth you shall cast the slackers.
Okay? He said, your dead are going to live. This is a prophecy that he's saying that there will come a time that the dead will live. And this is numerous places. And you find it in the 5 books of Moses. I'll send everyone an email with a link. On Chabad.org, you can find a list of like literally 30 verses that speak about the concept of the resurrection of the dead. So it's a fundamental belief of Judaism, the resurrection of the dead. And the question is why? Why the resurrection of the dead? So we're going to do an exercise on page, is this page 5 or page 6? Page 6. Take a look at the list below, and using a holy meter, assign a number from 1 to 5 to each item based on how holy you think it is, or at least can be. 5 is the holiest, and 1 is the least so. So Yom Kippur, is it a 5? Is it a 1? Is it a 3? Is it a 4? What about a steak dinner? How about a living room? What about the festival of Purim? What about To Kill a Mockingbird, the book? Sleep, prayer, baseball. After you complete the exercise, I want you to take a moment and try to discover a pattern. What is the pattern? What is the commonality between the things that you ranked higher versus the things that you ranked lower in your chart? And if you could share.
Well, I think higher are the things that I interacted with other people. Living room, helping someone across the street, spending time with family, visiting someone in the hospital.
Okay, how about Yom Kippur? Where's that on the holy meter?
Probably 3 or 4.
3 or 4, okay. And how about eating matzah?
That's right.
3. Okay. How about prayer?
It's 3.
Okay. How about in your holy meter? you do, okay.
I don't know.
Jordan, you see any pattern?
Well, I think anything that we would consider to be a mitzvah would be very high. So helping someone across the street would be, say, a 4.5. Visiting someone in the hospital would be a 5. Anything having to do with Shabbos, like say number 13, lighting Shabbos candles would be very high, like 4. But the mitzvahs would be the highest rank. Things done for pleasure would be lower rank.
So typically, okay. So things that are self-centered, low on the list, right? Things that are self-gratification, low on the list. Things that are other-centered, high on the list. Another way people divide this chart is spiritual things versus materialistic and mundane things. Things that are spiritual or holy or in service of others, that's very high in the chart. Things that are mundane or materialistic, very low on the chart.
Now, I would rank To Kill a Mockingbird fairly high, because there's a very important lesson to be learned about responsibility and how we act towards other people being God's creation. So I would rank that very high, even though it's not scripture, let's say. But I would rank that very high because you can learn something very important from that.
Very good. Okay. Okay, there's no right or wrong answer, but this just drives. Yes, Joe.
I would just say it depends with the intent with which one does the act. So, for example, Yom Kippur could be very spiritual, or it could be nothing if someone's just going to talk to their friends. As the last person said, To Kill a Mockingbird, if you can learn a lesson and if it affects one's life for the better, it's high. I think it's the intent, which even something mundane is done, it can assume a whole new identity and a whole new level of spirituality.
Very good. Very good. So this drives home the point, which is very interesting, which is your question, Joe. That's what we're going to address in this lesson. Your question was, why is it part of Judaism to believe in the resurrection of the dead? Judaism is not about the reward, right? Judaism is not do a mitzvah because you'll get a reward, right? The reward is the result of our actions. And the question is, why is the ultimate prize in Judaism us becoming alive again in physical bodies? Shouldn't we be in heaven, enjoying spiritual benefits? Why should we be returned to a body?
Because it gives us the opportunity to bring goodness to the world. When you return, you haven't learned a lesson because you don't remember it, but it gives you the opportunity to do tikkun olam and make the world a better place. So that.
What happens when you make the world the best? What's the ultimate?
The world isn't the best yet.
Not yet. But what happens down the line when the world is perfect? So then, what's the goal? Shouldn't we be? Then the world should return to the.
Well, then the world
spirit.
would have to return to Gan Eden for that to happen, and I don't see that happening, quite frankly, for a long time to come, if ever.
But if we do get there,
Well, if Hashem wants that to happen, then I'll worry about it when the time comes. But I see that it does give you the opportunity. It doesn't say that resurrection will stop here. I just think it gives us an opportunity to do good, and
Well,
that's.
the resurrection, but we have the Mashiach, and Mashiach also means it's a perfect world.
right? The Messianic era means it's perfect. The resurrection of the dead will happen after.
Okay, but define
Mashiach.
perfect. Define perfect. Got it?
Okay, maybe we'll get some more clarity as the lesson moves on.
Cold beer, steak.
Okay,
Well,
so
that's number 5, right?
So this question is text number 4. So we're not the first one to have this question. This question was already written about in the early 1500s. Text 4. Rabbi Meir ben Gaber writes, this is puzzling. Inasmuch as the soul is bound up with God in a bond of eternal life and experiences intense spiritual delight, this is talking about the soul after it leaves the body in the afterlife. Isn't that the greatest rest and reward ever? Why would the soul descend from such a lofty perch to return to her body that decays and turns to dust? The body is a limit, is a constraint on the soul's ability to fully feel one with God, fully perceive the truth. And now it has to do it all over again. Okay. Leave this idea simmering in your head. I'm sure we have ideas and approaches already. Now, about the idea, how realistic is it that Mashiach will come tomorrow and today? So that we did 5 lessons. We just finished a 6-week course
And
on
what
that.
was the decision?
And the decision was that we are living already in messianic times. The blind are seeing, the deaf are hearing, poverty is reduced 80% in the last 200 years, child mortality is reduced enormously. We're living in messianic times.
And the earth is being destroyed.
That's true.
So therefore.
That's true. So I'm going to send you a recording to lesson 1, but I'm not, you're right. You're right. We're not saying that there's no suffering in the world. We're not saying there's no suffering in the world anymore, but we are truly living in messianic times. As when you watch, okay, I'll share with you lesson 1. It's important lesson to see.
By the way, my name is Sharon
Hi, Sharon. Welcome. What's your last name?
Doretsky.
Doretsky.
Hi, Charles. Say hi to Erica. from-
Sharon.
It's
Hi,
me.
Sharon. How you doing?
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, Sharon. It's Joel from down the block.
Hello. We should carpool next time.
Okay.
Good idea.
You can you can go back.
Good idea.
Okay. So there's really, so we're not going to have time to really, we're going to assume that Mashiach means a perfect world, and that can happen tomorrow. Okay, so that we're going to have to be super rational about or religious about for the sake of this lesson. Okay, so now the question is, if the world is perfect, okay, now we did our job, well done. Now we get to enjoy the reward. Isn't the reward that we get to feel close to God, which is should be souls out of body? Why do we now is the soul brought back into the body? Okay, so there's actually two views. There's Maimonides, and Maimonides is a minority view. But we bring him because he wrote extensively on this topic. So we can't just ignore this opinion, even though it is a minority view, and most other rabbis of his era and before and after disagree. But this is his prospect on when we use the term throughout Talmudic literature of the world to come. What is the world to come? Is the world to come in time? That means right now we're in a world where we have to fix things. And the world to come means when things are already fixed in a perfect world? Or does the world to come mean the materialistic world is this world, Olam Hazeh, and Olam Haba means the world to come, where the soul goes to after it leaves this world. It goes into the world to come. It goes into a spiritual plane, which exists in the same time as this world. It's not a world that will come in the future. It's a world that already exists now. When the soul leaves the body, it's experiencing everything in Olam Haba. So which model would you say, what does Olam Haba mean? And that's the crux of the debate between Maimonides and everyone else. So let's read text 5. Stan, if you can read for us text 5 on page 8. You're on mute for us.
Transmission problem.
In the world to come, there is no body or physical form, only the souls of the righteous alone, without a body like the ministering angels. The ultimate of all reward and the final good that will have no end or decease is the life of the world to come.
Okay? He says, in the world to come, there is no bodies. Bodies is not, resurrection of the dead is not the ultimate reward. After the resurrection of the dead, there will be a spiritual, we will all merit to go back to the world to come. In other words, in Maimonides' view, resurrection of the dead is a blip on the scale, on the time scale. In other words, everyone's alive for a few short years, people die, most people are dead for a very long time, experiencing the afterlife. Then they will come down for resurrection, and Maimonides has to explain why. And then we will die again to experience life in a spiritual plane. This is Maimonides' view, a minority view, but Maimonides carries a lot of weight.
Can you do that again?
We're going to explain soon. I'll recover soon. But we live for a short time in the physical world.
Hold on, live short time. Okay.
then when the world is perfect,
Right,
we will be resurrected
right.
to live in a physical body, and then we will die again to go back to to live the ultimate experience, which is there is no body or physical form, only the souls of the righteous alone, without a body, like the ministering angels. The ultimate of all reward and the final good that will have no end or decrease is the life of the world to come. Okay? This is Maimonides' view.
So you have to wait for the world to be perfect for you to be resurrected?
Now, in this text that we just read, it doesn't mention anything about the resurrection of the dead. Right? So what happened was there was a rumor that was spread in Maimonides' times that Maimonides doesn't believe in the resurrection of the dead. And it became the biggest scandal. All Jews always believed in the resurrection of the dead. And now Maimonides seems to be cutting out resurrection of the dead. From this text, it seems to imply the ultimate reward is the spiritual life, which is different than everyone thought the ultimate reward is the resurrection of the dead. So, and people assume what he means that it's not the ultimate. If resurrection of the dead is not the ultimate, it must be that Maimonides holds it's not a real thing at all. He doesn't agree that it exists at all. And maybe he has a metaphorical reading of all the verses that speak about resurrection of the dead. Maybe he doesn't really believe in it. He only believes in spiritual life as the ultimate reward. And it became so controversial that he actually had to write works saying, no, I do believe in it. And one of his famous works was a letter he wrote to the Yemenite community clarifying his position. And so here's one of the places where he explains he does a treatment of resurrection of the dead. Who we have? Shem, if you can read first text 6.
I shall now begin to treat the subject that I originally intended. Know that just as a blind person can form no idea of colors, nor a deaf person comprehend sounds, nor a castrated man feel the desire for sexual intercourse, so the bodies cannot comprehend the delights of the soul. Just as fish do not know fire because they exist ever in its opposite, water, so are the delights of the world of spirit unknown to this world of flesh. Indeed, we have no pleasure in any way except what is bodily and what the senses can comprehend of eating, drinking, and sexual intercourse. Whatever is outside these is non-existent to us. We do not discern it, neither do we grasp it at first thought, but only after deep contemplation. It cannot be described, neither can anything be found to compare with it. It is as the prophet exclaimed, when admiring its great glories, how great is your goodness that you have laid away for those who fear you, that you have worked for those who take refuge in you. Psalms 31:19.
Okay, so first Maimonides is trying to say, Maimonides felt, why people are challenging my assertion that spirituality is the ultimate reward? Because they assume that if it's spiritual, it's not pleasurable. Because our instinct is pleasurable is material, is tangible. Spiritual can't be the ultimate pleasure. And so he comes to discredit that. He first of all says, just like you can't explain color to the blind, I cannot explain to you how deep this pleasure is. You'll just have to wait and see that it really is much more pleasurable an experience than any physical experience that a person could experience. Okay? Then he says, and Sharon, if you can continue text 7a.
The resurrection of the dead is a fundamental principle transmitted to us by Moses, our teacher. However, bear in mind that all people must eventually die, dissolving and returning to the matter from which they were formed.
In other words, he says, okay, I'll agree with you that resurrection of the dead is a fundamental belief of Judaism, and I'm not coming to take that away. But Maimonides says, anything material must dissolve. It's the rule of entropy, or whatever you want to call it. Everything that's physical falls apart, returns to chaos, Just like the world started in chaos and went into order, it'll return to chaos at the end. Physical things don't last forever because they're not real. They're a construct on top of a real existence, and all constructs eventually fall apart. Okay, that's Maimonides' positions. So let's read text 7b. Jordan, if you could read for us text 7b.
I'm allowed to say this, but what you just presented sounds it's quite a bit like another tradition's view of ultimate human reality, the Vedic.
Which
the,
view?
The Indian, the Vedic,
Okay.
that sense of material and non-material. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay. So, in other words, the resurrection of the dead will only be temporary. Thereafter, we will all return to Gan Eden, which is the ultimate and true good, otherwise known as the world to come.
Okay. So in Rambam's view, all the different references and sources that speak about eternal life are speaking about spiritual life. And that is real eternal life. Any references to resurrection of the dead are real as well, but it's a temporary thing that happens. And now he has to justify why and explain why. Now Maimonides himself does not explain why. He doesn't deal with it. He just says resurrection is not the ultimate reward. The ultimate reward is the spiritual life. Resurrection of the dead is a promised reward, but he doesn't explain why God will give us such a reward. What purpose does it serve? One of the explanations that are given on his behalf, although he does not say this, is that there are many mitzvahs that a man cannot perform today because Mashiach is not here. We don't live in Israel together. We don't have a holy temple. We don't have our own autonomy in the land of Israel. So we're only able to keep 87 of the positive mitzvahs out of the 246 mitzvahs that are 48 mitzvahs that exist. So we just have 78 today. So one of the reasons they present, maybe Maimonides believes that all souls will be able to come back into a body in order to be able to fulfill all the mitzvahs, which is the ultimate reward for a Jew yearns to do all mitzvahs, a soul yearns to do all mitzvahs. So this will be a stage. I'll be able to come down, do all the mitzvahs that I didn't have an opportunity to do while I was in this world, and then I'll go back to spiritual reality. Okay. Now we have a contesting view. And this, we're going to use Nachmanides. It's just like Maimonides. So you have Rambam and Ramban. Sounds the same. They lived during the same time. Different people. Ramban was an Ashkenazic scholar. He didn't live in France, but he was like the mediator between the French Ashkenazic scholars and Maimonides. Maimonides was a rationalist approach, and the French scholars were a very, it's not about understanding, it's about doing. Judaism is about doing, even if you don't understand. And if you try to understand, you end up messing things up. That was the French scholars' view. And Maimonides was, we should always attempt as much as possible to try to understand things and systemize things and make a cohesive structure. And Nachmanides, although he was in the camp of the French scholars, so to speak, who's more aligned with their worldview, he tried to make a synthesis and bring harmony and peace. And he definitely was opposed to the many people that tried to cancel Maimonides. There were many people that wanted to burn Maimonides' books during his lifetime, and he came to the defense of Rambam. Now, although he came to the defense of Rambam, it doesn't mean he always agreed with Rambam. And this is one of the classical cases where he disagrees.
It's like Hillel Shammai situation.
No, this is not a Hillel and Shammai. Little different. Okay. So, and his main challenge was this question: why would God resurrect the dead? Why would God do it? This was his main puzzle, Nachmanides. Why would God resurrect the dead? So he comes to say there are two concepts in Judaism. There is Gan Eden, or we're calling it Gan Eden, but there's the spiritual afterlife, and then there's the world to come. It's separate things. Maimonides said it's one thing. The world to come is the afterlife, is the place where souls return to after they pass away. Nachmanides says it's separate things. There's the afterlife, and then there's the ultimate world. This world progresses evolves into Olam Haba, into the world to come. And in that world to come, we will be souls in bodies. So let's read text 8. Joel, if you could read for us text 8 on page 13.
It is abundantly clear that the term world to come, used throughout rabbinical literature, is not the spiritual world of souls and the reward that they earn immediately after death. Rather, it is a world that God will create in the future after the Messianic era and during the resurrection of the dead. There are 3 stages. 1, the reward for the soul and the world of souls is called in the language of our sages Gan Eden, and at times it is also called Aliyah, on high, or the heavenly yeshiva. Thereafter, Mashiach will come, and thus begins the phase of the world to come, Olam Haba. The climax of that will be a day of judgment and the resurrection of the dead, which is the reward bestowed upon body and soul. The final stage is the ultimate goal and hope of everybody, of every believing Jew. It is the world to come, a world where body and soul will both return. The soul will climb to great heights in spiritual perception and delight, and both will endure forever.
Okay? The body and soul will endure forever. What do you think? Which position is more palatable to you? Or neither?
Well,
It could be neither, it could be both.
the body is unpalatable. My thought process is we're striving for the soul to be at peace with God. And that's heaven.
Right. So, one of the thoughts that were shared in the beginning of the lesson is that, maybe a belief in the resurrection of the dead is a way of like calming ourselves down, not to be afraid of death. But you can argue, even if you don't believe in the resurrection of the dead, you have a way of calming yourself down, saying, real life is life of the soul, and the soul never dies. So you don't have to be so frightened about death, because death is just a stage of life. It's like you're born, in the womb is one stage of life, and then you emerge from the womb to another stage of life, and then you pass on to the afterlife, it's another stage of life, right? So why do you need resurrection of the dead? To solve that. You don't need a resurrection, it seems a crutch. Additionally, Maimonides, in his defense, he says there's a statement in the Talmud that says, in the world to come, there is no food or drink. In the world to come, not there's no food and drink, the exact text is, there will be no eating or drinking in Olam Haba, in the world to come, which seems to be one point towards Maimonides. He has a weapon to use, which seems to imply no physicality. What does Maimonides say? No, that just means that we won't need food and drink. We won't eat for survival. Nachmanides, right? He says our body and soul will be there forever, but we won't need food to provide us with sustenance. Our body will live off our soul. Instead of external energy sustaining us, internal energy will sustain us. And in fact, Nachmanides says this is what we're trying to do on Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, when we're refraining from food, we're trying to live this experience where our body is not dependent on food and trying to reclaim this perfect state of existence where the body and soul are in perfect marriage and harmony. Because in Nachmanides' worldview, the purpose of food is to bring a marriage between the body and soul. Because in food, there's a divine spark that makes the food exist, and then there's a physical part of the food. And that physical part of the food, together with the spark of God, is what brings a bond between the soul and the body. And if you don't eat food, your soul escapes the body. But in the world to come, the soul and the body will be in such perfect harmony that you won't need food or drink in order to live.
But even
It doesn't mean that you won't be eating. You might eat for a different purpose, and that's Nachmanides' view, that there might be eating and drinking, but not for the sake of survival.
Well, your point about the intention, the reason for doing things, right? I think it was you said the intention of doing things. Why do we eat, right? Like that story about, there were two rabbis together, and then someone said to one rabbi, "Why do you eat? No, why do you bless?" And he said, "So that I can eat," right? And the other rabbi says, "Well, I eat so that I can bless," right? So the intention of why you do these things, even here in this realm, can sanctify and elevate what you do. I guess there won't be a need to do that in the world to come, according to.
Very good. Okay. And Nachmanides' view is the position that the Hasidic thinking takes, and so the ultimate view in the view in Hasidic thinking and in most rabbinic literature is this view that the ultimate reward will be souls and body. Now, why? And to answer this, we're going to introduce the reason of why the world was created to begin with. Why did God create a world? What was he missing? What was he missing before he created the world?
Someone to acknowledge and praise what he had done.
So he needs someone to acknowledge and to praise what he's done. Is he needy? Does he need recognition?
Yes.
Is he
Yes.
insecure?
No.
So what's the meaning? What's the ultimate meaning? Why does he need? I'm agreeing, but I want to dive a little deeper. Why is it that he really needs
Because he's
recognition?
He is a good God, and I remember I learned this recently, but the whole point is he's good, he's kind, he wants us to thank him, but only so. I don't remember it, but I do.
I would say maybe because recognition signifies that we are on the correct path. We recognize God, and we would behave properly.
But here's kind of a question, and another way of thinking about this. Who is God creating the world for? Is he creating it for us, or is he creating it for him? Is he creating it for him because he feels I need recognition? Or is he creating it for us because he wants to give us benefits?
I didn't mean it the way it came out, but there's this thing, this learning thing that explains it like in a nutshell that he.
I don't know how this relates, but I know that it does relate. What is the purpose of what we do here? The purpose of what we do here is to make this a dwelling place for God.
Very. And that's the deeper meaning of what she's saying. And I'll explain for our Zoom audience exactly the discussion that we're having here and what we're trying to say. So this is a big question of all religions. Why are we here? What's the purpose of it all? And the answer, as summarized by Rav Shneur Zalman of Liadi, is in text 9. This is what God wanted. And I'm reading the translation on page 15. To conceal and hide his eternal light, because in the beginning God's light was everywhere, God's presence was everywhere. So he concealed and hid his eternal light so that thereafter, through a lengthy process of spiritual evolution, a lowly material world could be created. This is a famous Kabbalistic concept of tzimtzum, where God retracts himself and makes space for other. God wished that humans should work to make a home for him in that world, to transform darkness into light, and realize the abundance of light that comes specifically from a place of darkness. What then, you may ask, is the purpose of this superior light that comes from darkness? The answer is, so is what God wished, and it transcends all reason. In other words, God made an experiment. He said, I know that I am real. I know that I exist. I know that I am eternal. I want to see if I can create an existence that denies my existence, that doesn't feel dependent on me. They will have free choice, and they will choose me. They will choose to recognize that this dark place is really just a charade. It really is a holy light place. God's presence is everywhere. But God made it feel to us as if he doesn't exist. And for us to uncover the truth from the darkness, this darkness is something that God can do, so to speak. This is God creating the rock that he can't pick up. You know that the thought experiment? Can God create a rock that he can't pick up? There's such a thing. Can God create a rock that he can't pick up?
No, because he can do anything.
What?
No, he can do anything.
But then he cannot create a rock that he can't pick up. So he can't do everything.
No, God can do anything. That's why you ask for, never ask for anything with a limit, because then you're putting a limit on Hashem. So if you want something,
So from Rabbi Shneur Zalman Liadi, he seems to imply that this was God doing this experiment. He was creating a rock that he can't pick up. He was creating a world, humans that have free choice, that could go against his will, and could mess up the planet, can destroy everything, can create forces of evil and destruction. That was God created. And then he said, let me see if they'll be able to find the truth within this darkness and uncover and put all these puzzle pieces that seem that everything is chaos and bring order to it. And so it won't just be a perfect world. God doesn't need a perfect world because he is perfect already. God created an imperfect world and had imperfect creatures make it perfect. A self-perfecting reality is what God desired.
Right. That's what you talked about a few months. That's what you talked about a few months ago. I think when you were saying that, God is limitless, God is all powerful, God can do anything. So God can create people who are going to be perfect, and then they're going to have to make choices because they're always going to be doing good. They'll be exactly like the angels. But the reason we're higher than the angels is because we have a choice, and it's our job to use that choice to evolve upward. So is that kind of the same thing?
Exactly. That's exactly what we're trying to say here. And it's similar. Think to our children, right? We all want our children to be independent people. We want them to grow and be self-functioning, self-sufficient, independent. But we want them to choose exactly like us. In other words, we want them to independently have the same values that we value, right? It's this paradox. If they would be, just, Dad, what do you think I should do? Dad, what do you think I should do all the time? Say, no, I want you to grow up. I want you to make your own choices. I want you to take off the training wheels. But then when they don't choose things the way we like, we're like, hey, we want you to choose our values. And this is the paradox God is going for. I want to create people that are independent, so to speak, or whatever that means, from me, who will choose me, right? And this will prove the ultimate realness of God, right? This will show the ultimate realness, that even in darkness, even in concealment of God, God is found there as well. Let's read text 16. So the ultimate goal is for us to make a home for God in a world that denies God. And when we say a home is a place where we feel comfortable. We don't put up a show. We're not getting all dressed up for the office or for soccer, for baseball. We feel at home. We feel ourselves. God says, I want to feel at home in your world that denies me. And I created that setup. I created those conditions for the world to deny me. And that's where I want to be at home. So let's read text, page 16, Charles, 10a.
Okay, 10A, right. So it's really on 17 then, I guess.
Page 16.
Oh.
17?
17. It's
17.
17.
Okay.
Okay, it continues there. Okay. The reason for creation in general, and humans in particular, is because God wanted a home specifically in this lowly world. Low, not in terms of space, as there is no high or low before God, rather low in stature. The idea is that this lowly material world be subsumed in the godly reality. This transformation is the purpose of the Torah and mitzvot. This then is the reason why Torah and mitzvot were given specifically to human beings in a physical world, who with their physical bodies deal with physical matter, so as to transform what appears to be apart from God to an absolute vehicle of godliness.
Okay. When you are driving your car, if you turn right, you expect the car to go right. What happens if you turn right and the car goes left? There's a break there, right? God says, I want the world to be an expression of my will. I want it to express my will. That means I want the world to go into a certain direction. I expect it to go there. But I created this car with its independent desires, and it can decide that when I turn right, it can decide, okay, we're going left. But I want it to actually become a vehicle and become consistent with my will. That the vehicle itself should choose that when God turns right, we're going to turn right. And that's what we do when we are doing Torah mitzvahs. We are taking matter and we're directing it to be part of the divine will, to be expressions of the divine will. That the world should start working in harmony with exactly how God intended for perfection, a perfect world to exist. And that's what we do when we take a hide from an animal and we turn it into filling. We take wax and we turn it into candle to light Shabbat candles. We're now showing that these things are expressing divine will. When we light Shabbat candles, when we put on tefillin, when we write on parchment and mezuzah scroll, when we take our hard-earned money. So we ate in order to be able to function well at work. We slept in order to function well at work. We used our brains and our negotiating skills and our people skills in order to make $1. And then we used that dollar to do a mitzvah. We just directed all that energy to be part of divine will, to be expressions of divine will. When you ate, it now became an expression of divine will because your eating helped the world become a better place, right? So that's why charity is such a big mitzvah in the Torah, because when you spend $1, it's all your whole self is in the dollar. Your sleeping, your energy, your work, your eating, your whole, so that's why charity is such an important mitzvah.
So it's not a gesture to God. Doing that mitzvah is not a gesture to God. It's actually doing the work of God.
Exactly. That's the big Jewish idea. When you do a mitzvah, it's not like God is the big boss. He likes to boss you around and tell you what to do. And in order to get you to listen, he holds a big stick over your head. If you don't listen, I'm going to beat you. And if you do listen, I'll reward you handsomely. No. God says, I want you to make this a home for me. And then when we paint with the right colors, the world, this home for God, God says, I feel at home in this place. When we decide we want to paint with the wrong colors, or we want to trash the building, that is the consequence. We are living now in a messed up world that we ruined. Okay. So now we understand where resurrection fits in to this puzzle. resurrection, typically in most religions, spirituality is the most important thing. The goal of religion in most religions is to teach us how to transcend our physical selves, our physical impulses, our physical desires, and focus on higher spiritual realities. When in truth, according to Judaism, we have spiritual moments of our day to inspire us to be intentional about the way we use physical things, and that we should use physical things in a godly way. So the whole purpose is really to express God's will in the physical world. That is the whole purpose of creation. The whole purpose is not for us to escape the physical world. It's really for us to bring godliness into the physical reality. And so, do we, as the story goes, do we bless in order that we can eat the food? Do we make a blessing in order to eat the food? Or are we eating the food in order to make a blessing? Right? And which one is true? They're both true. We bless in order to bring spirituality into the food. And we eat food in order, so we really need spirituality in order to make sure that we don't become corrupted by the physical world. But we don't try to escape the physical world. We try to bring spirituality into the physical world. And so this is the marriage that we're here to create, to bring harmony between the spiritual and the physical. And that's how we make this world a home for God. So now, let's read text 10b. Stan, if you can read for us on page 18, and maybe it's also 19.
The entirety of creation is advancing up the ladder of perfection and gradually becoming more refined. In terms of world history, the salvation has three rungs: the present era, the messianic era, and the resurrection of the dead. In the first era, the period before the advent of Mashiach, the world is preoccupied with a constant battle between the forces of good and evil. Sometimes the forces of good triumph, other times the opposite. During the second era, the messianic era, the battle against evil, we will be redeemed. In the third period, the period of the resurrection of the dead, evil will be utterly eradicated. The world will know neither sin nor death. We will then receive unimaginable and incomprehensible reward. This reward will be granted to the soul in a body, for at the time the original purpose for which the universe was created will have been fulfilled, to create a home for Hashem in the lower worlds.
Okay, so now we understand why resurrection is such a fundamental belief in Judaism. Because it represents the synthesis between spirit and matter, between body and soul, which is the whole purpose of creation. The whole purpose of creation is for God to feel at home in the physical plane. So, this era of the resurrection of the dead is nothing we can imagine today. It's not like our bodies won't just be healthier. It'll exist in a new reality, but it'll be physical. It'll be physical, and when we see God, we'll see God with our physical eyes. Now, God doesn't have an image. God is not physical, but neither is God spiritual. God is not physical, and God is not spiritual. Right? God is beyond that. God is an essence.
God is what?
God is beyond spiritual and beyond physical. Okay? And yet, the same way you could see godliness in a spiritual sense, when Mashiach comes, you will also be able to see God in a physical sense. What will happen? You know, to the materialist, you know, what you see is what you get, right? But if you ask someone, is a piano, music comes from a piano. So you open up the piano, you're like, I don't see music. How can you say music comes from a piano? I open up the piano, I don't see music. Right? Say, no, the piano creates the music. Say, what are you, You know, there was this science. You ever heard of Mayo Clinic? So one of the doctor that founded Mayo Clinic, one of the Mayo brothers, he said if you put a dollar amount in all the chemical and material of a human body, it comes out to 85 cents in his time. Now, inflation adjusted, $5, right? The whole body is worth $5. You say, okay, that's crazy, because we're more than just a body. We're more than just a body, we're a human life, right? And he was trying to make that case. He was trying to say, don't reduce the person just to his parts and just to his chemicals. We're much more than that. When you see, so, in other words, it's not, what we have to train ourselves to see is that the physical world is an expression of God. But now, when we look at physicality, we see something that conceals God. But once you put everything in order, then all of a sudden what seems like something that masks God actually becomes the way that you actually see God. And you start seeing God in everything. When you look at the table, you'll see expression of God. You look at another person, expression of God. Everything becomes unified expression of God. Because he creates everything, but he's the essence of everything. And we will, when Mashiach comes, we'll experience that. So we didn't really we didn't get into the technicals yet, but at least we understand why is it the ultimate goal. You know, why is it the climax of history? It's because that's really what God wants, is souls and body. So now you understand, God takes the souls out of the afterlife and sticks it into a body. It's prison all over again. No. The first time it came into a body, it was a prison, so to speak, but it was a prison for a purpose. You know, you're in the body in order to make a perfect world within that constraint, within the constraint of time and space and bodily needs and functions and ego and all that stuff. In the resurrection, where our soul coming back to the body in order to see the world and in order to see the way God is within everything. And that's a more truer vision of God than the way the souls see God. When the souls in the afterlife see God, they're only seeing half the picture. They're seeing the way God expresses himself in spiritual terms. When the soul will reunite with the body, they'll now be able to see it multicolored. They'll be able to see it with the spiritual and the material woven together, expressing a perfect truth, which is what we await for.
So I want to jump ahead. So that basically the sequence we have here is creation and imperfection in order to work towards perfection.
Mm-hmm.
Then coming back to see the fruits of all that labor of perfecting, along, right? And then finally the reward stage, when the body and the spirit are rejoined. So that's kind of like the linear sequence.
Yeah. The thing is, the perfection stage took a long time in human terms, It's taking a long time, and some feel that it will take a lot longer, right? Some people feel that way. However, once Mashiach comes, it won't be too long until the resurrection of the dead happens. And how long, we'll get to in the next lesson. Okay, so thank you everyone for coming for this first lesson. And we have a lot more things to cover. How will it happen? Who will it happen to? And many, many more.
Maybe in the next lesson it will come up, but one thing that bothers me or whatever is if we were given the capacity to do all this tikkun olam and to improve things, why is it that we choose not to, or some people choose not to? Why is it that we have the capacity to do good? He falls down in the street, I have the capacity to go over and help him. Or I just I have to go, I'm in a hurry, and I just move on, right? Why do we do that? Why do we just move on? So I don't know if that's for later, but
That's
all.
it's not going to be in future lessons. It's something I think we addressed in the last course, is that after the sin of the tree, the fruit, Adam and Eve, their sin, evil became a part of us. In other words, initially, our goal, we were imperfect people, but we didn't have evil within us. Evil was on the outside, and we had to tend to the garden, so to speak. We had to weed out the weeds that were external to us. After that sin, evil became part of us, and now it became double the work, but also double the reward. In other words, not only are we becoming a partners in creation, but we're becoming a partner in creating ourselves. In other words, initially we're partners in creation, we're creating the world together, because God created an imperfect world, and now we're creating a perfect world. Now, but what about us? We were created perfect, so to speak, so we don't have to say that. We were like forced into this when we sinned with the tree. Now we're granted this ability to actually become partners in creating ourselves and making ourselves good people. And there are half of us that is completely good. And there's a half of us that's selfish and self-centered. And that is tremendous amount of work. So initially, God gave us the tools to create the world. Yeah? Now God said, now you have to make your own tools, right? Not just you have to fix the world, but you actually have to make the tools yourself. And these are really us uncovering deeper truths. But when we uncover it, it's more real. Think about one way to think about it is think about, let's say, a sweater that you knitted yourself, right? You spent many, many hours knitting that sweater. Someone could go into the store and buy a more perfect sweater for $10. You just spent 7 hours creating the sweater. It's less perfect, but it's your own. So to you, it's extremely valuable. To others, it's like, this is a less perfect thing.
Well, that's why you tell your children, and you have your children work for something, so that it's sweeter for them working for it than giving it to them.
Exactly. So that's what God
There's
says.
more value if you earn it.
So exactly. So could God have created a perfect world? Sure. But that's not the goal. The goal, God wants us to create the perfect world. And God also wants us to be a partner in ourselves. So
I feel like a lot of what I've learned in that room over the years is coming together right now. Really, seriously, that's because you said reward before. We were talking about reward, and now what I just was thinking about just went out of my head. So,
okay, I was caught up. We didn't do the slideshow, but hopefully without the slides, we gained the lesson.
We start.
What?
We gotta start.
We got to start. Okay. Very good. Okay, and we'll see everyone next Tuesday, same time, same place.
That's right.
That's right.
All right. Yashikov, thank you.